Hello and welcome to the Money Magpie Invest podcast. I'm Jasmine Birtles, and today I'm joined by Susie Violet Ward, who's the CEO of Bitcoin Policy UK, which is a think tank on Bitcoin policy, obviously enough. And it advocates, and I've got it written down here from the mission statement, it advocates for good policies that will benefit all those who, in the UK who hold, use, and mine Bitcoin. Hello, Susie.
Hi, Jasmine. Thank you for having me.
Well, Susie, it's great to speak to you because, first of all, I read from your mission statement there, but I think it's still slightly confusing to understand exactly what Bitcoin policy does. So, in a couple of sentences, can you explain what you are and what you do?
Okay, yeah. So we want to position the UK as a leader in Bitcoin mining adoption and in financial innovation. So we want to support innovation, we want to protect individuals and integrate Bitcoin into the UK's economy.
Okay, great. So why do you feel that Bitcoin is so good for the UK? Because so many people, particularly those in the city, are very really poo-poo it still. They go, oh, there's nothing behind it. Oh, it's just, smoke and mirrors. What do you feel is so good about Bitcoin for our economy?
Bitcoin, unlike fiat currencies, has a scarce supply. So our current money gets debased constantly. So they can pump money into the system, which devalues our money, and we have no control over that supply. So Bitcoin has a fixed supply of 21 million, which is divisible by 100 million Satoshis. And it means that it can't be inflated by central banks. It's also decentralized and borderless. It has no central authority. Bitcoin can be owned and transferred freely without intermediaries. And I don't know if you've ever sent money via a bank, but sometimes it can take up to 3 days, and you have to have a couple of holding banks, and it can go through processes. And you'd
Mm.
think in this day and age it would be a lot easier and simpler. And banks aren't even open at the weekends as well. So this whole system is 24 hours, and it's completely global. And although I think the reason why people in the city don't understand it or see its value is because they have operated in a system that works for them. So they haven't felt the pain, and therefore they haven't had to look at the system closely enough to see where the flaws are. But if you lived in a country like Zimbabwe or Argentina or Lebanon and you'd suffered from hyperinflation, you'd understand that historically governments devalue their currencies to manage debt. And I think that that's exactly what's happening with us right now. The figure that they show us with regards to inflation isn't really accurate. There's actually a website called Trueflation where you can actually go and have a look at the real inflationary value. And Bitcoin protects people against their purchasing power over the long term.
So a bit like gold, I guess. You've got that limiting factor which keeps governments honest, I'm guessing.
Gold definitely kept the money supply honest, and we did come off the gold standard in 1971, where before that it was all of our money was backed by gold. I don't think a lot of people realize that it isn't anymore, and that money can just get pumped into the system through debt creation. So gold is good and has historically been good, but it's very hard to transport. It's not very easy to divide. It's really difficult to verify, unlike Bitcoin, which is on an open source global ledger that can be verified by anybody. And its actual value isn't really increasing when you compare it against inflation. Whereas if you look at Bitcoin, it's the best performing asset of the decade.
So we do you've mentioned Zimbabwe in various places that are actually using Bitcoin, but it's only in small amounts, isn't it? Because there are a lot of people who say, well, it's clunky, it's slow, it wouldn't work if you had millions, billions trying to use it at the same time. What do you say to that?
So I wouldn't necessarily say that these countries are using Bitcoin in any meaningful way, but it is a solution for these countries. And I would say that if 8 billion people all of a sudden started using it, it wouldn't work because it's still growing. It's a 16-year-old asset. It's very, very new. But the growth in that time has been exponential. I don't think it's necessarily ready for every single person on the planet, but that doesn't mean that it's not providing meaningful solutions to people right now. So I know people that do use it as a lifeline, especially in the global south, especially if they live under authoritarian governments.
Interesting. So we're talking about Bitcoin. Your organization is Bitcoin Policy UK, but of course there are loads of other cryptocurrencies. Why do you just concentrate on Bitcoin, or don't you? Do you look at other currencies, other cryptocurrencies as well?
There are, with regards to policy, there are synergies between Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies. But the reason why we focus mostly on Bitcoin, although we do obviously have to look at everything from a holistic point of view, especially when it comes to legislation, is because the Bitcoin is the only decentralized protocol. It's not owned by anybody. Anybody can use it. Anybody can get on board, and it's completely global peer-to-peer cash. The other ones are VC companies with central controls, and they are often claimed to be technology companies that are solving problems, although I would say that there's only a handful that legitimately fall into that category, and the most of them are pump and dump schemes. Out of the hundreds of thousands of cryptos there are, it would be almost impossible to know which ones had value, if any.
Now, one of the questions, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, particularly Susie, was because something that's concerning me a lot and a few other people that I've been interviewing is that it feels like we're coming in this country and across the West, particularly, we're coming to a crunch point with our money, particularly sort of state money, that we're coming to a point where I would think in 15, 20 years in the UK, for example, we're not going to have the money to pay for the state pension, to pay for the NHS, to pay for education and all of that. The money, it seems to me, will be running out. But you feel that Bitcoin has a solution to this.
Yeah, I do. Yes, I do. I think that the financial innovation that comes with Bitcoin can offer the UK a lot of solutions. So the UK needs financial innovation to keep competitive, and London is a global financial hub. But without clear Bitcoin policy, businesses will have to relocate. In fact, I know a lot of businesses that have already had to relocate because of it to more friendlier jurisdictions. And with regulatory clarity encourages investment. Our government keeps talking about growth. I haven't seen anything that they've said that suggests that they actually understand how to grow the economy. And so, as I said before, Bitcoin is the best performing asset of the decade. It can close that gap. We know that old investment portfolios are not working, pensions are failing, the 60-40 split is no longer viable, especially with the bond market. So they're having to look at alternatives, and BlackRock got on board last year. There's now a Bitcoin spot ETF. In other countries, not in the UK, they can invest in Bitcoin in their pension portfolios, and it will actually close that gap for underperforming pensions. So, there's lots of reasons why we need to have this innovation in the UK.
So I'm a fan of Bitcoin myself. I've invested in it, but there are times when I speak to some people, particularly techie people, who say, well, they're going to be supercomputers, and these supercomputers will be able to break the cryptography that currently protects Bitcoin. What do you say about that? Because we need to have something that's really strong if it's going to help the UK economy.
Absolutely. So Bitcoin is anti-fragile, which means that it's designed to fend off attacks, as opposed to your laptop that has antivirus on that tries to keep the viruses out. With quantum computing or supercomputers, when you look at all the systems that we currently have, they're so flaky. Bitcoin will be the last thing to break. So I would be more concerned about my Halifax account or any other account that I've got. I mean, they get hacked all the time. They're not very good with their data. Do you remember the WannaCry, the NHS hacking?
Good
That was
point. Yeah.
they didn't do patching, just simple things like that. So if you've got something that's 16 years old that has a proven track record and has never been hacked, I would say that if quantum computers or supercomputers are a problem, it will be the last thing that goes.
So you could say to the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, which I suspect is the entity that's kind of blocking things at the moment, you could happily say to them, this is safe, it's usable, it will help the British economy, and don't worry about quantum computers, supercomputers, because Bitcoin is stronger than all the other systems.
Exactly that, yeah.
Good. Oh, well, okay then. So you're saying really that Bitcoin is the answer to the UK's and the global financial problems, because as I say, to me, it feels like we are moving slowly but inexorably globally towards some sort of financial crash.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to, as a world, we're going to have to find an answer to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And a money that's inherent to the internet that can be sent peer to peer to anybody on the planet with a mobile phone and an internet connection. In some cases, you don't. They're working on solutions where you don't even need the internet for this. So it's neutral. It's outside of governmental control. It can't be debased. And I've said it a couple of times, but it's the best performing asset of the decade. It can solve a lot of problems. People just need to understand it. But it is very complicated, and there's a lot to learn.
Well, is that the issue then? Because we hear about, for example, the BRICS countries working on a new currency, something to replace the dollar, which sounds, from what I'm hearing, to be gold backed. It doesn't seem that they're interested in, a Bitcoin based currency. Is it because they don't understand it, or is it, as you've just said, because it's out of the control of governments, and governments go, oh, I don't want something that's out of our control?
Interesting that you mentioned BRICS, because they don't necessarily want to back it just by gold. They want to back it by commodities. So that could be a basket of commodities. So, for example, Russia's quite rich in oil. China would have the gold. But although they've got an agreement now between them, it doesn't mean that they necessarily trust each other. And verifying China's gold reserves and verifying Russia's oil reserves to know that the commodities backing this new BRICS, potentially new BRICS currency are there, would be really difficult. If you had an open source ledger that could be verified by anybody, then it would be a no-brainer. You wouldn't have to trust, you could just verify.
Okay. So essentially, Bitcoin Policy UK is saying that really we have the solution to what seems to be an intractable problem going forward with the increase in demands on the state purse, particularly with an aging population, and a decrease in growth, a decrease in tax income, probably, we think, going forward. That the actual proper solution is Bitcoin, and the government needs to wise up to this.
That's exactly right, because at the moment they're talking about growth, but I've seen absolutely nothing that suggests that they understand the task at hand, or anything that suggests that growth is actually going to happen. Tax cuts won't work. The deficit is too large. Increasing taxes will just be a drop in the ocean, because I believe that the current debt to GDP ratio is about 100%, and 77% is the tipping point. Once you're in some sort of debt spiral, it's very difficult to get out. Once you get into that situation, the answer is debasing the currency. They obviously won't tell you that's what they're going to do, but it's the only way that they can get their debt under control, is to inflate it away.
So basically, it'll deflate it for the government, but it'll mean that costs for us day to day will rise and rise, because that's inflation. As they deflate the economy, the currency, the cost of our living goes up and up and up. We need more money to pay for things. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly it. Yeah. And they won't even tell you the true cost of inflation. We know this. So when they said that inflation was at its height, it was at 10%. If you looked at the trueflation, it was actually 20. The way that they calculate it is, say if you like buying ribeye steak and you suddenly have to swap to sausages, then they will take ribeye out of the basket and put sausages in. So it's never a like for like comparison. So even the figure that they do give you has been manipulated.
Yeah, this is what I've been saying for a while, because you can see, as you say, from your own shopping basket,
Mm.
how much things have gone up really. So when they say, oh, inflation is X, you go, nah, it's not, it's at least twice that. But you say that cutting taxes won't work. Why does that not work? Because doesn't that encourage work? Doesn't that encourage growth and therefore increase in tax take?
I'm not opposed to cutting taxes. I personally think that this is a little bit controversial, but I think that we shouldn't be paying tax at all. I think there are much better options. And a lot of people even consider tax as theft. I know that seems like a very, very controversial thing to do. And it's
A
not.
lot of people are saying that. I know a lot of people who are refusing to pay certain taxes now. So yeah, I think you're in with what's happening at the moment.
I'm not saying that that is a Bitcoin policy stance. I'm just saying it's one viewpoint, because you can't necessarily take money from somebody and then give it to somebody else and decide how somebody else's money is spent for somebody else in that economy. It sounds like it's fair, but really in reality it isn't. And when a lot of our tax goes on things that we have no control over, so fiscal mismanagement, the interest that we pay on our debt is so high. So a lot of people are working really hard, swapping their time for money. Their money's being debased. They're paying their taxes. Their taxes are going on debt interest and war. So it's not really going on the things that we want it to go on anyway. And we have very little choice over these things.
So essentially, if we moved to a Bitcoin-based economy, we wouldn't be allowed to deflate the currency. We would actually be forced to make cuts and to manage the economy properly rather than just print more money, whenever it was a bit difficult.
Exactly that. And you'd also, if you had a sound money that actually held its value, you would be less likely to want to spend it on things that did not serve you. So
Well,
you would have to be more responsible. Yes.
yeah, and of course governments don't like that. So will that happen? So this is really what Bitcoin Policy UK is doing. It's trying to explain to governments that they need it and that it does work, I'm guessing.
Yes, absolutely. And there are many examples around the globe where they are starting to incorporate it into their economies and governments. For example, the US are talking about making it part of their reserves. So you know how we used to have gold reserves, and now they want to have a Bitcoin reserve, which is a very good idea. It's going to factor in a lot of decision making processes in the future, and game theory is definitely going to kick in at some point. I just would really like the UK government to start paying more attention, because it's not even about just like that. It's also, it can help with our energy solutions. So you know that we have really high energy costs in the UK. We pay, I think it's millions, if not close to a billion, in curtailment for renewable energy. So that's to switch off to avoid it overloading the grid. So you know when you see wind turbines that aren't turning, it's not because
Yeah.
they're broken, it's because there's too much wind and the grid doesn't need the wind at that time. So they have to pay a lot of money to switch those off. But with Bitcoin mining, because it connects energy back to money, just like gold in 1971 and prior, when it was connected and when money was connected to gold, you now, and that's where another thing that a misconception is, people think that Bitcoin's bad for the environment. But actually, what it does is it can mitigate methane, it can use stranded energy, it can help with demand response and flexible loads when it comes to grids. So, one solution that we want to propose to help our renewables in the UK, rather than costing the taxpayer and the energy payers lots of money to curtail energy that could be produced, you can switch over to Bitcoin mining. Rather than switching off, you would save the money and generate an extra income stream, and it's instant. They've got so many examples of doing this, and they're doing it really, really well in Texas. So it's not a theory, it's being done elsewhere. We would like to do it here in the UK.
Sounds like a no-brainer to me. I mean, it does seem, as you've hinted, that our government, like many other governments, need to educate themselves into what Bitcoin is, what it can do, and how it could transform our economy. How should individual MPs and individuals listening to or watching this educate themselves about what Bitcoin is? Where do you go to get some really proper information?
You can go to our website. We write consultation papers and we write open letters. We've got papers on Bitcoin mining that can explain things like demand response and how we can use renewables. So we have all the information that you will need on our website. We're actually revamping it at the moment. There'll be a new version of it at the end of the month, so it'll be a lot better. So if you can't find everything at the moment, it will be coming.
So we'll put the link for Bitcoin Policy UK in the notes below, so you can see that. Well, thank you so much, Susie. It's been extremely educational to speak to you. Thank you for coming along. And this has been the Money Magpie Invest podcast. I'm Jasmine Birtles. I'm the founder and editor of MoneyMagpie.com. So if you want to know more about Bitcoin, about cryptocurrency generally, do go to moneymagpie.com. In fact, have a look at our invest section, moneymagpie.com/invest, because we have a lot of articles, videos, and even ebooks on investing in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So take a look at that. If you enjoyed this, tell your friends, like, share, and sign up to our newsletter. You know you want to.